Hello class. Today we're going to be looking at cellular respiration, and so these are our four kind of topic questions to be able to understand when we get done with the notes. Number 1, write out the equation for cellular respiration and explain it in words. Number 2, define heterotrophs and provide an example. Number 3, describe the process of cellular respiration starting with glycolysis when there is not oxygen present, which is called the anaerobic pathway. Include the products and ATP that's made. Number 4, describe the process of cellular respiration starting with glycolysis when there is oxygen present, aerobic pathway, including the amount of ATP made. Okay, today we're going to be looking at cellular respiration, and cellular respiration is how heterotrophs make energy. And so we did autotrophs and photosynthesis and looked at that process, and the products of photosynthesis are sugar, or organic compounds, and oxygen. Cellular respiration needs oxygen to start, and it needs that sugar to start as well. And so what we're going to do is look at this process using organic compounds to start. There's a process here of glycolysis, which we'll go through and what happens there. There's some ATP produced at that point. And then there's two pathways. If oxygen is absent, it's called the anaerobic pathway or fermentation. And then if oxygen is present, which is what you want to happen most of the time, we have aerobic respiration, which also produces ATP. So you can see ATP is produced in glycolysis and also in the aerobic respiration, but it is not produced in the fermentation side. We'll get to what you end up with there a little bit later. So first we'll give an equation to cellular respiration and kind of a definition of what that is. And if you're using your notes packet, you can just put this into the cellular respiration box. You can see the equation is already done for you on the page just below that. And then heterotrophs, there's a definition for that as well. So cellular respiration is sugar plus oxygen. If we write this out in words, and you may want to do that on your own sheet, sugar plus oxygen produces carbon dioxide, which that should give you a little clue of where these products are going to go, plus water, plus energy, or ATP. I'm going to draw a little energy kind of thing around it. You could do that. Okay, so sugar plus oxygen produces carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. Now if you notice, this sugar plus oxygen right here, it came from photosynthesis. So this is kind of the beginning where you start to see that these are cycles that work together. And then if you notice here, carbon dioxide and water are going to be used in the photosynthesis process. So we end up with this big cycle. We'll kind of do that on another day's notes. A definition for cellular respiration is the complex process where cells make ATP by breaking down organic compounds. So taking organic compounds, make energy. The term heterotrophs are organisms that have to eat something in order to have their energy. And if they don't have that ability, they can't make their own food. They're not autotrophs. Autotrophs make their own food. Heterotrophs have to eat something else for their energy. Okay, this process of cellular respiration will happen in the mitochondria. So in our photosynthesis example, we had chloroplasts where everything happened, and in cellular respiration, that's going to be the mitochondria. All right, we'll start with glycolysis, and this is the beginning of cellular respiration. So if you're in your notes packet, you can flip to that page. It's kind of a little flow chart for you. Cellular respiration is kind of our big title, and then glycolysis is in the circle there for you. So glycolysis is the start, no matter what, of cellular respiration. Whether oxygen is present or not, glycolysis always happens. And the definition for that is, again, a biochemical pathway, which just means chemistry of life. It's a pathway that has chemicals that deals with living things that produce very little ATP. From there, we are going to go down two paths. Okay, and our two paths are either with oxygen or So with oxygen or without oxygen. If oxygen is present, that means like your daily activities. You're sitting here, oxygen is freely flowing through your veins. You're having no problems at all. And so at that point, it's called aerobic respiration. Now, if you think about aerobic exercise, those are things that you can do for a long period of time without getting too tired. You're taking in an ample amount of oxygen for your blood, for the mitochondria to be able to produce ATP. And on the oxygen side, you produce a lot of ATP. So examples of activities, long distance activities. Long distance running, maybe just when you're sitting around. Those are aerobic activities, even though they might not be much of an activity, but they're aerobic things because you're constantly taking in oxygen. Without oxygen, glycolysis heads to the anaerobic respiration side, or fermentation as it's known. And the key here is that there's no ATP produced. On this side, we're going to produce some things that will help us help us to produce ATP later when oxygen comes back, but we get no ATP. So all you're doing in this side is using energy, but not replenishing it at all. So that's why you can't do anaerobic activities forever. An example is sprinting. You can only sprint at a certain pace for a certain amount of time before your muscles just start cramping up, or you feel that kind of heaviness in the muscles. You can't continue to go at a fast speed forever because you're not getting enough oxygen into the muscles. So if you look at your flow chart, you can kind of see that already on your sheet. We go through glycolysis, and then there's two options, with or without oxygen. In glycolysis, and you can see this in your flow chart if you're using the notes packet, we use 2 ATP to start. So it's kind of like starting up the cycle. We need 2 energy molecules to start the pathway. And you can see if you're filling out the notes packet that there's a line for you to fill that in. Glycolysis will make 4 ATP, and so there's a spot for you to put that in. So total, we end up with 2, because we used 2 and we made 4. We would subtract those out, and we get 2 ATP. Other products include NADH, which again is just a chemical. It's a chemical that will get used later on to help make ATP, and 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, and that will get used as well in this process. Okay, so that should fill in your glycolysis circle in this flowchart. We're going to look at the without oxygen side here first. So anaerobic respiration, it's also called fermentation. And so if there's no oxygen present or very little oxygen present, you're going to go to this side. Does not produce ATP, but it will produce some other things that are used to help make ATP later. Now there's 2 sides to this, or 2 avenues that this can go. Alcoholic fermentation or lactic acid fermentation. And you can see those on your chart as well if you're using that. Lactic acid fermentation helps produce some foods. Examples are yogurts and cheeses. It occurs in your muscles during very strenuous exercise, such as sprinting at top speeds. So lactic acid is that stuff that makes your muscles feel really heavy when you're working out, when you're doing something like sprinting or lifting weights or doing some type of explosive activity. And if by chance you do something and you're sore the next day, that's actually lactic acid that has built up in the muscles. And a good way to get that out is by pumping your muscles again. So the next day you might be really sore and not want to go do any activity. You really actually need to help get that lactic acid out of the muscles. If lactic acid accumulates, you will have contracting, fatigue, pain, cramping in those muscles. So that's where you're going to generally think of it. And if you want to put an example of anaerobic exercise, you can put sprinting or lifting weights, explosive type things. The alcoholic fermentation side is used by some plants and unicellular organisms, and it's used in the wine and beer industries and making breads. And that's really all you need to know about it right now. There's more detail in your book. If you'd like to look that up, you can, but that's really all you're going to need to know at this point. For this set of notes, we're going to end there. We'll make sure, I'm going to go back a couple slides here and make sure that you put in with fermentation what you get. So example would be sprinting or something like that. It does not produce ATP, and I'll give you some other things that it does produce in the next set of notes. We'll come back and make sure that you have all those things filled in. So you should have glycolysis, and then the left side of the page, which if you're using the notes packets on the left side, the anaerobic side filled in.